Let's get started. If you wouldn't mind, if you could introduce yourselves, and then we'll take care of any preliminary matters, housekeeping, anything that we'll get out of the way.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, and may it please the court. We are here in the case of the United States versus Blake Crosby. My name is Arabella, Loera, and I, along with Linda Arts,
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
represent the United States of America. We have joined with us Special Agent Morgan DeVico.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, good afternoon. My name is Margaret Veglahn, and I'm joined here in court today by my colleague, Mr. Ian Carter.
Good afternoon.
Together, we represent the defendant in today's case, Ms. Blake Crosby. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Okay, anything before we start?
Yes, Your Honor, before moving on to opening statements, we do have a few pretrial matters. First, Your Honor, we have a pretrial binder for you to reference throughout this trial. In this binder, it includes documents such as the pretrial order with the evidentiary rulings, stipulations. It also includes the jury instructions and then a bench copy of the federal rules of evidence. The defense counsel has seen these documents. Permission to approach and tender?
Accurate.
It is, Your Honor.
Okay, okay. What else?
What was that, Your Honor?
What else?
Yes, we would like to direct your attention to the stipulations, specifically 11 and 12.
Okay.
Which say that both parties have agreed that exhibits 5 and 7 were recovered from law enforcement on July 5th, 2022. They have maintained custody until this trial, and all objections have been waived based on the authenticity and chain of custody for those exhibits.
Okay, noted.
Pursuant to stipulation 16, Your Honor, the parties waive all objections to exhibit 16.
Okay.
Additionally, both parties have agreed per stipulation 17 and 18 that if Harper Edwards or Gray Judd do not testify at trial, the parties waive all objections to the admissibility of exhibits 9, 17, and 18. And just for the record, Your Honor, those witnesses will not be testifying in this trial.
Okay,
Your Honor, for purposes of this trial, our understanding of the local rule is that objections are made in a constructive sidebar outside of the jury's presence.
yes, so you can just assume that while they're physically present, everything's going to be outside their earshot constructively, and you can just make the arguments as you would otherwise.
Yes, Your Honor. And lastly, we ask for your preferences about movement about the well, whether Your Honor would like us to ask for permission when approaching opposing counsel, the bench, or witness.
You have free reign within a degree of reasonableness. So you don't need to ask permission to do anything as long as you're respectful and don't make some movements towards each other or the bench.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, the United States is ready to proceed.
Okay, defense, are you ready to go?
Just one thing, Your Honor, we move to invoke Rule 603, which calls for the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
Okay, we will assume they're all constructively sworn in. Is anyone going to invoke the rule 615? Are we assuming anyone's sequestered, anything like that?
Your Honor, I believe both testifying witnesses today will be party representatives here at table.
Okay, that makes,
That's
Yeah.
our understanding too, Your Honor.
I believe counsel covered everything else. We're ready for trial.
okay, let's go.
Arabella Loera for the United States. May I proceed?
Go ahead.
May it please the court. As long as Senator Capello is alive, none of us are safe. Those are the defendant's words. Those are the defendant's words that the evidence will show she acted on July 4th, 2022, when she killed Senator Capello in Philadelphia. Now, before we begin, we want to make one thing very clear. That as the United States, we recognize that some people loved Senator Capello. Some people hated Senator Capello. But it's important to remember, members of the jury, that Senator Capello's policies, opinions, they're not on trial today. And I'm sure that we can all agree that an attack on a political candidate is an attack on all of us, an attack on the democracy, something that doesn't belong in a civilized society. So we ask you to put the politics aside and focus in on the proof. That is the evidence. So what will the evidence show? Well, the evidence will show that the defendant admits to going to Philadelphia to protest Senator Capello. The evidence will show that the defendant admits to staying at the Sonesta Hotel. The evidence will also show that the defendant initially had a different story, that the defendant wasn't on top of the roof for the Sonesta Hotel. But later, you will learn that the defendant changed her story. She was presented, you see, members of the jury, with DNA and fingerprint evidence of her cigarette butt found on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. But you may be asking yourselves, who cares? What about this rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel? So members of the jury, the evidence will also show you that that is where the shot was fired that killed Senator Capello, struck him right in the forehead in front of thousands at the rally. Now, the accuracy and the range of that shot is not within the skill set of a lay gun owner. It's not within the skill set of even a federal law enforcement agent with firearm training. No, this skill set is particular. It belongs to a trained marksman. In other words, a sniper. Now, members of the jury, as the prosecution, we have a burden of proof in this case. We need to prove to you, pursuant to 18 USC 1111, that the defendant Blake Crosby killed Senator Capello and did so intentionally and deliberately. And we will meet this burden. Not only was the defendant's DNA evidence found at the scene of the crime, but the evidence will show that there was a bullet found, the same bullet that matched the one that struck Senator Capello, just feet from the cigarette. Not only that, but parts of the murder weapon were also found. We ask that you listen to the evidence, members of the jury. The defendant was vocal about not liking Senator Capello, and we will present to you social media posts that Blake Crosby posted, admitting she did not like Senator Capello. She stated 3 months before the shooting that as long as Senator Capello is alive, we're in trouble. And the day of the shooting, another post saying it's Patriot Day. Those were the words of the defendant. Again, the evidence will prove this to be true. And that's why at the end of trial, I will come before you again and ask that you find the only just verdict, guilty for murder. Thank you.
The defense intend to make an opening?
Yes, Your Honor. Closing counsel. Members of the jury, may it please the court. The government needs a conviction. And Blake Crosby is convenient. It's July 3rd, the day before Senator Capello is murdered. Blake Crosby goes up to the roof of her hotel. She doesn't have a gun. No bullets. She's there for a smoke break. And nothing more. You see, Miss Crosby is in Philadelphia to see the senator speak, to stand up for what she believes in, to protest, and to do it peacefully. So the next day, on July 4th, she gets up. She exercises, takes a shower, goes to breakfast, heads to the rally, and watches from the crowd as Senator Capello is shot and killed. She wanders the streets of the city, shocked, horrified at what she's just seen. She goes to dinner. She goes home. On July 4th, 2022, Blake Crosby goes to sleep. And she's been living a nightmare ever since. Because when the FBI and Secret Service go up to that roof, they find a bullet. And what's lying nearby? The cigarette Miss Crosby smoked a few days earlier. Just like that, members of the jury. The government has a story, has a criminal, has a villain. They have an easy answer, not the right one, but they have justice at the expense of a just verdict. The government needs a conviction. Blake Crosby is just convenient. And that's a problem for this prosecution. Because when they decided to accuse my client of murdering a candidate for president of the United States, they took on a burden to prove that it was true. That burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest burden in our legal system. That means it's the government's job, and their job alone, to make sure that when you go back into that deliberation room, you don't have a lingering question in the back of your head, a nagging thought, a single reasonable doubt as to whether or not Blake Crosby is the one who assassinated Senator Capella. It's a burden they won't be able to meet today. And to show you why, we're going to ask you 3 questions that the government just can't answer. Where was Blake Crosby? Where is the gun? Where is the person who actually killed Thomas Capella? So first, where was Blake Crosby? We expect today you're going to hear evidence that Miss Crosby was on the ground at the rally, not on the roof with a rifle. Counsel just told you that you're going to hear DNA fingerprint evidence, but what you're going to learn is that that's not on a gun. It's not on a bullet. It's on a cigarette. And when you hear from Miss Crosby herself, we expect she'll be able to explain why that cigarette was there. But she smoked it the day before. So second, where's the gun? We expect you're going to learn that the government has never recovered the weapon that was used to kill Senator Thomas Capella. They found just one part of it, something called a trigger guard, in the trash can at a local restaurant. But we expect you'll learn that the government doesn't have a single piece of forensic evidence that actually ties that trigger guard to my client. By then, members of the jury, I expect you'll ask the last question yourself. Where's the person who actually killed Thomas Capella? We expect today the government is going to talk a lot about Miss Crosby's politics. She didn't like Senator Capella. She didn't agree with Senator Capella. We expect you'll hear today that at that rally, there were hundreds of people who didn't like Senator Capella. Hundreds of people who didn't agree with Senator Capella, all of whom had access to that same public roof. You'll learn the government picked a villain before they investigated every possibility. Government needs a conviction. Blake Crosby is convenient. All that we ask of you today is that you afford Miss Crosby the one fundamental right the government never did. Her innocence. Presume that she is innocent unless they prove that she isn't. The end of this trial, when they fail to do that, I'll ask you to find her not guilty. Thank you.
Government? Any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the United States called Special Agent Morgan DeVito.
Legion?
Arabella Loera for the United States. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Morgan DeVito.
Special Agent DeVito, what do you do for a living?
I've been working for the United States Secret Service for a little over 21 years now.
How did you get into that line of work?
Well, when I was little, watched a little bit too many spy shows, and then I ended up working for the Secret Service. Started out as a normal agent, worked my way up to senior, and now I'm heading the protections unit, have been for about 8 years.
So what is your job in the protection unit for the Secret Service?
Through the protections unit, it's my job that we protect specific candidates. Specifically in this case, Senator Tom Capella was the candidate that we were supposed to protect for the case of July 4th.
Could you tell the members of the jury who Thomas Capella was?
Of course, he was a state senator here in the United States. And on the day of July 4th, he was on his 4th stop running his presidential campaign.
So now I would like to talk to you about 4th of July. Were you in Philadelphia on the 4th of July?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what was your role there that day?
That day, it was my job to lead the security detail in protecting Senator Capella.
And what happened after the rally began?
About 1:45, Senator Capella approached the podium, began speaking. At 1:47, there was a gunshot heard throughout the crowd. By 1:48, Senator Capella was already dead.
Mr. DeVico, where exactly were you when the shooting occurred?
So me and my team, we had stationed ourselves at several different places at the Rittenhouse Square. My specific location was in the crowd amongst the protesters that were watching that rally.
And when the shooting took place, what did you do?
As soon as that gunshot rang out, I figured it was my responsibility to secure the scene and make sure that everybody else was safe. I drew my weapon and I made sure there were no combatants in the area while my team went to go secure Senator Capella.
Next, I want to talk to you about your investigation in this case. How exactly did you begin your investigation after the assassination occurred?
Of course. So after the assassination occurred, we looked into interviewing witnesses, reviewing surveillance footage, and looking into the nearby area to see if we could find any evidence that pointed us towards the right killer.
And what, if any, evidence did you find?
We found a number of evidence, the first of which we got a tip from an anonymous source saying that there was a trigger guard found in a trash can at Cleaver's, the local cheesesteak place.
And finding this trigger guard, where did that lead your investigation from there?
So we figured that they had been dismantling that gun. So we looked in the nearby area because we knew that trigger guard was for a sniper rifle. We began looking at the
Objection,
rooftops.
Your Honor. Lack of foundation, may I be heard?
Go ahead.
I don't believe there's any foundation on the record for how Agent DeVico would know that that trigger guard came from a sniper rifle. That testimony can't come onto the record until that foundation does.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Mr. DeVico has testified that he's been in the Secret Service and conducts these types of investigations before. So it's well within his knowledge to know these types of weapons, what kind of material was found, and specifically because he did help in the investigation of this case, it's within his knowledge to know what pieces of evidence were being collected by also the Secret Service and the FBI and where they led the investigation from there.
I'll give you the last word of the question. I know this is the criminal prosecution, but do you have a good faith basis to believe the foundation is lacking, or that the agent won't be able to provide this testimony, or just that the procedural part that he needs to lay a little bit more reporting for people?
Yes, Your Honor, we just believe that the Secret Service agent doesn't have the foundation alone to make that conclusion. We do believe that there are ways for them to lay it, but we believe at this point, he's not a firearms expert, he's not a forensic expert. We don't believe there's been foundation for him to make that.
I'm gonna reserve ruling and give you a little bit of time to lay some foundation. You can turn back to this if you think it's lacking. So I suppose that's partially sustained at the moment, but let's see where this goes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. DeVico, what types of investigations have you conducted in the past?
Throughout the course of my time at the Secret Service, I've worked in investigations for bank robberies and other high-profile crimes. While this was my first homicide case, we made sure to work with the FBI in identifying certain evidence to make sure that we are going down the right track.
Now, in your time with the Secret Service, are you familiar with forensic evidence?
I am. I'm qualified to interpret that forensic evidence.
Now, previously you mentioned that you found a trigger guard, and that led you to believe it was attached to the rifle in this case. So where did that take your investigation from there?
From there, me and my team began looking at the rooftops of buildings in the nearby area. We looked at the windows and on the tops of these buildings and narrowed it down from our forensics team to 2 hotels across from the Rittenhouse Square. Eventually, based on the nature of that bullet, the way that the angle had assaulted Senator Capello, but we narrowed it down to the Sonesta Hotel.
And would you recognize the guest check-in list from the Sonesta Hotel?
Yes, ma'am. Not long after, a hotel clerk at the Sonesta Hotel recalled us and gave us a reservation list for everybody who was staying at the hotel on July 5th, the day that the senator was killed.
Your Honor, Exhibit 9 is up there on the witness stand. He will be referencing it and it will be entered into evidence. I just wanted to note for the record that opposing counsel has seen and approved of the usage of these documents.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
And Agent DeVico, could you flip to Exhibit 9 in that binder?
Of course. I'm there.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of the guest list you mentioned?
Yes, ma'am. It looks about the same as when we first got it.
It's clean and unmarked.
Yes, ma'am.
It hasn't been changed in any way.
That's correct.
Your Honor, the United States offers Exhibit 9 and also Exhibit 5, the bullet at this time.
Pursuant to stipulation, we have no objection.
Okay, both are admitted.
Your Honor, permission to publish both to the jury?
Amen.
Now, Mr. DeVico, based on Exhibit 9, did you find any evidence linking to this case?
Yes, we did. When we were looking at everybody who was present on July 4th, we made special notice that somebody had requested a room next to an emergency stairwell.
And why did you make that special notice?
Well, we noticed that there was only one staircase in the Sonesta Hotel, and it was the only way to access the roof of that building.
And did you talk to any witnesses from the Sonesta Hotel about this document?
Yes, we did. At the time, we spoke to that same hotel clerk. I believe their name was Harper Edwards, and they told us about the people who were on this list and what was available at the hotel.
Did Harper Edwards ever mention seeing people from that guest list in between July 3rd and July 4th?
Objection, Your Honor, at this point under best evidence, may I be heard?
Sure.
So objections to this witness's affidavit have been waived. We believe counsel needs to enter it into evidence before they can go into the context of the document.
Your Honor, may I respond? Because pursuant to stipulation, the admissibility of this document has been waived, we can choose whether or not to enter it. Furthermore, Your Honor, because Special Agent DeVico was an investigator in this case, he does not necessarily need the document presented to him to be able to talk about the statements that were part of his investigation.
Right, the statement doesn't have any independent probative value because it's something that the witness learned throughout their investigation, isn't it?
Yes, Your Honor, but pursuant to Rule 1002, if there is a document available to be entered into evidence and counsel's testifying to the contents of that document, it has to be entered into evidence before they can do it.
I don't think that's what 1002 says, so that evidence applies if it has independent probative value or the document is at issue in the case, like a defamation case and exacting statements. So for that reason, I'm going to objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Agent DeVico, you were saying that Harper Edwards, an employee of the Sonesta Hotel, had mentioned something about a guest to you. Could you tell the jury what she mentioned?
Of course I can. When we spoke to Ms. Edwards, she told us that on the day of July 4th, she had seen somebody trying to access the roof of that building. When she confronted them, that person then went to the 25th floor and went to a hotel room. That's why we looked at the 25th floor and the access into that rooftop.
Was Harper Edwards ever able to later identify who she saw in that stairwell?
Yes, ma'am. Harper Edwards, we gave them a lineup and they pointed out the defendant in this case, Blake Crosby.
Agent DeVico, is Blake Crosby's name on that guest list?
No, ma'am, it's not. But when the FBI interviewed Blake Crosby, they told us that when they were booking this reservation, they were using a fake alias. On this page, it's Pat Henry, the same person who had requested that emergency stairwell.
Agent DeVico, you mentioned that that person was going to the rooftop pursuant to Harper Edwards' statement, right?
That's correct.
And after that, did your investigation lead you to the Sonesta rooftop?
Yes. After we found that there were possibilities that someone A had been shooting from that rooftop, B that someone had access to that rooftop, we went there to see if we could find any evidence connecting it to the killing on July.
Did you find any evidence on the rooftop?
We did. While we were there, we found two very important things. First, we found half of a cigarette that we believe to have been smoked recently, and a bullet, one that matched the same type used in the assassination.
You would recognize the cigarette if presented to you in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Please turn to Exhibit 7, which is a photocopy of that cigarette. Your Honor, permission to, excuse me, Your Honor, we offer Exhibit 16 and 7, which is a cigarette in the forensics report, into evidence.
No objection, once again, pursuant to stipulation.
Okay, and then could you remind me what 16 is?
It's the forensic report from the FBI.
Got it, okay.
Permission to publish to the jury.
You may publish and they're both admitted.
So Agent DeVico, what did the cigarette tell you?
When we looked at this cigarette, we found that somebody had possibly been up there recently. We sent it to the forensic unit to be tested.
And what was found?
When they looked at that result, we found that there were fingerprints and DNA belonging to the defendant, as well as gunshot residue, which was concluded to mean that that cigarette was nearby when a gunshot had gone off.
Were you able to confirm that it was a match for the rifle shot on July 4th?
We were able to confirm that the bullet we found matched the rifle that was used on the day of July 4th.
Thank you, Agent DeVico. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Approach the jury to retrieve exhibits 5 and 7. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
I just want to pick up where you left off, sir. You told us that you looked into Blake Crosby because she had access to the Sinester room, right?
That's correct.
Sir, to be clear, everyone in Philadelphia has access to the Sinester room.
Yes, ma'am. That's what Miss Edwards told us. We looked specifically into the defendant because of their request to be next to that staircase that gave them access to that room.
But sir, that's a yes. Everyone in Philadelphia had access to that stairwell.
That's correct.
Sir, if I walked 8 blocks down to the Sinesta and Rittenhouse Square, I could go up to that roof right now. Sure.
I believe so. I'm not currently there. I couldn't tell you.
So Agent, let's just talk about where Blake Crosby was on July 4th, all right?
Of course.
Because it's true, you don't have any photos of her from that day.
No, just the eyewitness testimony from Miss Edwards.
Sir, to be clear, there's no eyewitness that actually places Miss Crosby on the roof, right?
No, just right outside the door next to the hotel.
Right outside the door an hour before the shooting, right?
That's correct.
So you don't have any video surveillance footage that places Miss Crosby on that roof, right?
No, ma'am.
But you did review the statement of an eyewitness who was at that rally, right?
Yes, we did. We reviewed the statement of somebody named Mr. Judd. We believe that their alibi not exactly worked out. They said they had no photos either, so we had to take it with a grain of salt.
Hold on, sir. I just want to be very clear for the jury about what that protester said. They said they saw Blake Crosby at that rally, right?
Yes, but the time range that they gave was from 10 a.m. to right before the shooting. So we weren't exactly sure.
So, sir, that's a yes to my question. They said they saw Blake Crosby at that rally.
Correct, between those 4 hours.
They said they were 100% sure that the person they saw at that rally was Blake Crosby.
That's correct.
So let's talk about why you're still so sure that Blake Crosby was up on that roof. Sir, I just want to be very clear about what the government's version of events is. So the way you tell it, this cigarette and this bullet were both left on that roof by Blake Crosby, right?
Yes, that's what the evidence showed.
So sir, let's just pretend for a second that I'm the shooter. I go up to the roof and smoke this cigarette, right?
Yes,
Leave it on the ground, right?
whether or not it was placed, thrown, forgotten, flicked, we're not sure.
Right, sir, but my fingerprints are on it.
That's correct, as well as the DNA.
And then I shoot Thomas Capella, right?
Correct.
Gunshot residue gets on that cigarette.
Yes, ma'am, that's true.
And then I leave behind this bullet a few feet away, right?
Once again, not exactly placed, maybe dropped, but yes.
But you found the bullet a few feet away from the cigarette, right, sir?
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
Let's try another version of events. Let's say same deal. Go up to the roof the day before. It's July 3rd. With me?
Of course.
July 3rd, go up, same deal. Smoke a cigarette, leave it on the roof.
Correct.
But let's say the next day, someone else comes up to that rooftop. Mr. Carson, could you actually step into the well? Your Honor, I hope this isn't the sudden movements you were talking about.
So far, so good.
Let's say that Mr. Carson comes up the next day and shoots Thomas Capello, sir. You might still find gunshot residue on that cigarette.
That's correct, but that distance between that cigarette with the defendant's DNA and that bullet, we have no evidence to prove that anybody else was up on that roof.
Well, sir, that's a yes to my question. If Mr. Carson shot Mr. Capello instead, gunshot residue would still be on that cigarette, right?
That's correct, ma'am.
If he left that bullet behind 4 feet away from my cigarette, well, this scene would look just about the same as it did before.
Just about, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. You can retake your seat. So I want to talk about which of those two versions of events actually makes more sense. Because certainly we can agree, Blake Crosby's fingerprints are on this cigarette, right?
That's what the results show.
Sir, we can agree Blake Crosby was not wearing gloves when she smoked this cigarette, right?
No, we found their fingerprints on it.
But you didn't find any fingerprints on that bullet.
No, ma'am, we did not.
Sir, you didn't find any fingerprints on that trigger guard, did you?
No, ma'am, we believe that the person might have been wearing gloves during the actual shoot.
You believe they might have been wearing gloves, sir. We agreed Blake Crosby was not wearing gloves when she smoked this cigarette, right?
Correct.
All right, sir. Then I want to talk about who else could have committed this crime. Because we can agree there were thousands of people at that rally, right?
That's correct, but not so many were able to shoot a sniper rifle.
Thousands of people at that rally, sir.
Yes,
You know that some of those people were protesters, right?
we do. They were carrying signs, wearing t-shirts, things like that.
Sir, in your investigation, you looked into people that had a motive to kill Senator Capello, right?
We did. And when we looked into the defendant's motive, we found death threats on their social media, and that pointed us in the direction of Blake Crosby.
Sir, you said that you found death threats on the defendant's social media. I want to be clear, you found more death threats for Senator Capello than you can count, right?
That's correct. But specifically in the defendant's death threat, it was on the same day that they booked that reservation where they wanted to be next to that staircase, and on the same day they booked a flight to Philadelphia.
More death threats than you can count, sir? That's a yes.
That's correct.
Sir, you can't tell us if one of the people who made those death threats got that route.
No, we can only tell you the defendant made a death threat and was also at that route.
Sir, you can't tell us if someone else had the opportunity to shoot Thomas Capello.
No, ma'am, we cannot.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further.
Redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that Special Agent DeVico be excused.
Thank you, excuse.
Of course.
Anything else from the government?
Nothing else from the United States, Your Honor. We rest our case in chief.
Short and sweet. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Blake Crosby to the stand. Can I proceed? Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself, to the members of the jury?
Hi, my name is Blake Crosby.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Crosby?
Well, I used to serve in the military, but now I'm driving for Lyft and Uber.
And we've heard a lot of accusations about you in this trial. I just want to give you a chance to respond. Did you shoot Senator Thomas Capello?
No, of course not.
So let's back up. Where were you on July 4th, 2022?
Well, I was in Philadelphia. I was actually protesting at a rally held by Senator Thomas Capello.
Ma'am, just to be clear, were you the only protester at that rally?
No, there were thousands of us out there.
When did you arrive in Philadelphia?
I got into Philadelphia the day before. I checked into my hotel on July 3rd.
Ms. Crosby, I want to talk about some of the evidence that the government has shown. Do you know what this is?
Yeah, that looks like a Marlboro cigarette.
Did you hear what the government said about this cigarette?
Yeah, they said that they found my DNA on that cigarette.
Do you have any idea why they might have found your DNA on a cigarette?
I have a smoking habit. The day before July 4th, I went up to the hotel, the Sonesta rooftop, and I smoked a cigarette.
Ma'am, on the day Senator Capello was killed, on July 4th, did you go up to the roof of the Sonesta?
No, I only went up on July 3rd.
Ma'am, I want to talk about this. Exhibit 5. Do you recognize this?
Yes, the FBI showed it to me when they were interrogated.
When you went up to the roof of the Sonesta Hotel on July 3rd, did you bring this bullet with you?
No, I didn't have any bullets with me that weekend.
Did you have a rifle with you?
No, I'm from LA. It would have been pretty hard to put a sniper rifle through PSA.
Ma'am, do you even own a sniper rifle?
No, I have a handgun, but I left that at home.
Ma'am, you told us that you were in the army. Can your handgun shoot this bullet?
No, you'd have to have a sniper rifle to shoot a bullet like that.
So let's talk about the day of July 4th. How did that day start?
Well, I woke up pretty early. I woke up at 5 a.m. I decided to exercise for about an hour, went back to the hotel, showered, was hungry, so I got something to eat, and then I went to the protest at Rittenhouse Square.
What time did that protest start?
I got there right when it started at 1 p.m.
And what time was Senator Capello killed?
That was around 1:50 p.m.
Ma'am, where were you when Senator Capello was assassinated?
I was in the crowd at the rally. I saw him go down.
So ma'am, just to be very clear for the members of the jury, from when you left your hotel to go to breakfast, to when you saw Thomas Capello shot, did you ever go back to the Sonesta Hotel?
No, I didn't go back to the hotel until way later that day.
Thank you, ma'am. I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor, for the witness. I'd just like to read a portion of Exhibit 18 onto the record. Both parties have waived all objections to this exhibit pursuant to stipulation 8.
Is that correct?
Pursuant to stipulation, yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
It says on July 4th, I saw Crosby at the Capello event. I'm 100% sure I saw Crosby at the Capello rally on July 4th, 2022. With that, I have nothing further.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Crosby.
Good afternoon.
Now, you would call yourself a patriot, right?
Sure, I love this country.
That's right. You once served this country.
That's right, 8 years.
You were in the United States Army,
Yes, ma'am.
and you've reached the rank of first sergeant, right?
That's right,
You'd recognize a copy of your military record if presented to you.
I would.
Ms. Crosby, in that binder in front of you, please flip to Exhibit 14.
I'm there.
That's a copy of your military record.
Looks like it.
It's a fair and accurate copy.
Yes, ma'am.
It's clean and unmarked.
That's right.
Your Honor, the United States offers Exhibit 14 into evidence and would just like to note for the record that we will be redacting paragraphs 3, 4, and 5.
I don't have a copy with me, but,
I have an extra one, Your Honor,
Oh,
if you'd
that's
like to. Yep.
are there any objections to the document with those redactions?
If it's just the first 2 paragraphs, we have no objection.
Okay, so 3, starting with served in Afghanistan.
Is redacted.
Is redacted, yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so 3.
That's fine with
4,
it.
5. Okay, with those redactions, we'll constructively do that. The document is submitted.
Permission to publish to the jury.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Crosby, you didn't only reach first sergeant. You were above many soldiers, right?
Yeah, I was.
You had to climb the ranks.
That's right.
You would say that you were good at your job.
I was really good at my job.
So good at your job that you won 4 sniper competitions.
Yeah, that was back in 2016, 2014, 2013, 2010.
But still, you won 4 sniper competitions during that time.
That's right.
You were so good at your job that you actually held the U.S. Armed Forces record with a bullseye from 1,504 yards away.
Yeah, that was a pretty good day.
You can go ahead and close that binder, Ms. Crosby. Now that we understand a little bit about your skill set, I'd like to move on to the July 4th shooting of Thomas Capello. Now, you were in Philadelphia that day, right?
That's right. I was protesting at that rally.
And that's not the only Capello rally you went to, right?
No, I had been to a few others in the 5 days leading up to that one.
You flew from Los Angeles to Boston,
That's right.
and then you drove from Boston to Philadelphia.
Well, I got a rental car and I went to a few different places, I went to Providence, Rhode Island, but yeah, I did go to Boston and Philadelphia.
And you arrived in Philadelphia on July 3rd.
That's right.
You checked into the Sonesta Hotel,
Yes, ma'am.
but you checked in under a different name, didn't you?
Right. I used the name Pat Henry.
That's right. You checked in under a fake alias, Pat Henry.
I didn't use my name. I'm a pretty private person. I use the same name when I'm ordering my Starbucks coffee.
So because you're a private person, you checked into a hotel using a fake name?
I did.
All right. Well, not only did you check into that hotel, but you requested to be next to the emergency stairwell on the 25th floor, right?
Yeah. I was in the military for 8 years. I like to be near exits, so I'm sitting over there.
Well, to be clear, the 25th floor leads out into the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
Yeah, I can take you to the rooftop, but it's also the direct. We can get you down to the lobby in case of an emergency.
That's right. It can also take you all the way down to the basement.
Sure. Yeah.
And guests have access to this rooftop.
Yeah, I think so.
Non-guests have access to this rooftop.
Yeah, there was a sign that said that we're not supposed to go up there, but yeah.
But you did go up there, right?
Yeah, July 3rd, I went to go smoke a cigarette.
But when investigators asked you if you ever went to the rooftop, you denied it, right? You denied it once.
I did.
You denied it twice.
Yeah, I was being interrogated by the FBI. After a political candidate was murdered, I was terrified.
You denied to the investigators, the FBI, 5 times that you ever went to the hotel of the Sonesta, correct?
I denied that I went to the rooftop, but I told them that I was staying at the hotel.
Excuse me, that you denied 5 times that you went to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
Yeah, I told them I wasn't up there.
Now, you also told investigators that you weren't a fan of Thomas Capello, right?
I wasn't.
But you didn't just tell investigators that, did you?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I'll clarify, Ms. Crosby. You posted about it on social media,
I did.
and you'd recognize copies of those posts if presented to you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like you to open that binder in front of you to exhibits 13 and 12.
I'm there.
These are copies of your social media.
Yeah, that's me. Blatant Combat 23.
You recognize these to be true and accurate.
Yes, ma'am.
They're clean and unmarked copies.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the United States offers exhibit 12 and 13 into evidence. Without objection.
12 and 13 are admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury?
Okay.
Now, starting with exhibit 12, Ms. Crosby, you stated that Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every person in this country.
That's right.
Those are your words.
Yes, ma'am. I tweeted that.
So you think that Capello was a threat?
I do. He wanted to defund the military. I'm a veteran. Defunding the military isn't just about less drone strikes. It's about less healthcare, less education, stuff that I wouldn't be able to afford without my time in service.
So it's safe to say that you hated Thomas Capello.
I certainly wasn't a fan of him.
So that's yes to my question that you hated Thomas Capello.
Sure.
Well, you even said as long as Thomas Capello's alive, none of us are safe.
That's right.
You said this is the time for patriots.
Yes, ma'am.
And this was just 3 months before Thomas Capello was assassinated, right?
It was April 5th, so yes,
So that's 3 months before the assassination.
that's right.
And now looking at exhibit 13, this was a post you made on the morning of July 4th, right?
It is.
It says it's Patriot Day.
Yeah, I guess I should have put some fireworks. I was just trying to celebrate 4th of July.
Well, you can go ahead and click the binder. I'd also like to talk to you about other statements. Now, you claim that you were at the rally on July 4th, right?
I was.
It's your testimony that you were there the whole time?
I was.
But That's a lie, isn't it, Miss Crosby?
No,
It's the truth that you were on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel.
no,
It's the truth that you assassinated Thomas Capello.
no. I was at the rally.
And that's your testimony that you were at the rally.
It's not my testimony, it's where I was.
Well, I'm just asking you, but just to clarify, that's your testimony that you were at the rally on July 4th.
I was at the rally.
So if an eyewitness saw you going to the rooftop on July 4th, they would be mistaken.
Yeah, that's not where I was.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor. I would, at this time, no further questions for the witness, but would like to read onto the record with the time remaining, a statement.
Before you do, any objection? from the defense?
No, Your Honor, this is one of the statements that we stipulated to be admissible.
Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Harper Edwards stated that she saw someone trying to access the rooftop at 12:45 p.m. on the 4th of July. How sure are you? 100%. Who did you later identify? Blake Crosby. And with that, I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Yeah, Your Honor, briefly. Ma'am, are you still active military?
No, it's been almost 6 years since I was in the military.
When was the last time you actually shot a sniper?
Had to have been 6 years ago.
Do you still think you could do it as well as you used to?
No, no way.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further.
Recross based on that.
No recross, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
We have nothing further, Your Honor. We've waxed our case.
Okay, these jury instructions say that I shall constructively read them. I have done that. The jury is instructed. And you may proceed to closings whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to retrieve evidence from the what I published to the jury. Arabella Loera for the United States. May I proceed?
Right.
May it please the court. Thomas Capello is a threat to every person in this country. And as long as he's alive, none of us are safe. Those are the words of the defendant, members of the jury. You'll be able to see them when you go back to deliberate. This was a Twitter post that Blake Crosby, the defendant, made just 3 months before the assassination of Thomas Capello. Members of the jury, we told you at the start of the trial that this is not about politics, it's about proof, and it's about evidence. So we want to walk you through what we heard throughout trial, starting with Blake Crosby. You heard that Blake Crosby is not just a normal lay person. No, Blake Crosby was in the military. In fact, you have Blake Crosby's military record. Now, she was a first sergeant. She was good at her job, she testified to. She testified that she won several sniper competitions. But not only did she win, though, she held the record for a number of years for hitting a bullseye from over 1,504 yards away. She had the skill. Did she have the accuracy? That tells us so. Now, members of the jury, when we connect that to the forensic report, and again, it's Exhibit 16, and I encourage you to pay very close attention to the forensic report. You'll have it with you when you go back to deliberate. Members of the jury, when you look at it, what you're going to see is that the bullet was fired from approximately 300 to 900 yards away. That's well within the range that the skilled sniper Blake Crosby was able to hit. But don't stop there, members of the jury. We encourage you to look further at the forensic report. We heard testimony from Special Agent Morgan DeVico, that during his investigation, he found evidence that pointed at Blake Crosby. First, there was a cigarette butt. We know that the defendant smoked the cigarette. We know that the defendant smoked the cigarette on July 3rd on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. She admitted it herself. That was after she lied time and time again to the FBI about it. What was she hiding? Why couldn't she just admit that she went to the hotel to smoke a cigarette? 5 times they asked her, 5 times she denied before she finally was presented with this. The investigator said, we found your DNA on this, we found your fingerprints, and that's when the defendant changed her story. That's when she said, oh, I did go to the rooftop, but on July 3rd. Okay. Well, when you look back at the forensic report, you're also going to notice that not only was the defendant's DNA evidence on the cigarette butt, but so was gunshot residue, which means that the cigarette was there when Thomas Capella was assassinated, when that gun was fired from the Sonesta Hotel. Members of the jury, we know, of course, that the defendant stayed at the Sonesta Hotel. She admitted to having access to the rooftop. She admitted to having access to the emergency stairwell because upon request, she wanted an emergency stairwell exit on the 25th floor. But DeVico told you when the defendant checked into the hotel, she didn't use her own name, no. She used an alias, Cat Henry. Again, what was the defendant trying to hide? Well, members of the jury, it seems obvious because on July 4th, we get to the day that Thomas Capella was assassinated, and we get one final tweet from the defendant. It's Patriot Day. 3 months after saying that we're not safe, that Capella was a threat as long as he's alive. And we have an eyewitness who placed the defendant in the stairwell of the Sonesta Hotel on July 4th. You heard it, members of the jury. Harper Edwards' testimony, an employee of the hotel, said at 12:45 p.m., I saw someone in the stairwell. They admitted to going up to the rooftop to smoke a cigarette. Later, I confirmed that this was Blake Crosby. How sure? Harper Edwards says 100% sure that it was Blake Crosby. As members of the jury, we, the United States, had the burden of proof. We need to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Crosby killed Thomas Capella and did so deliberately and intentionally. And we have met our burden. We have laid out every single piece of evidence that points to one person, one rooftop, Blake Crosby. We ask that you find her guilty. Thank you.
Closing for the defense. Closing counsel. Members of the jury, may it please the court. The government needs a conviction. Blake Crosby is convenient. You know, I understand that the U.S. Attorney's Office is in a really tough spot right now. A candidate for President of the United States has been assassinated. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, but every time it has, justice has been swift and it has been severe. So I understand why. When the government found Miss Crosby, they thought they had found the most convenient villain. I mean, she disagreed with the politician who was killed. She was there that day, protesting in the wrong place, at the wrong time, smoking a cigarette on her hotel roof, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. I understand why, when the government couldn't find any actual ironclad evidence, they decided that something was better than that. They decided that a face, a name, a trial, a conviction, an arrest was better than loss and fear and panic. But that doesn't make it right. Because on July 4th, 2022, Miss Crosby was just there to see the senator speak. She was there to stand up for what she believes in, to protest, and to do it peacefully. That's it. The government needs a conviction. Ms. Crosby's just convened. And that's a problem for this prosecution. Because when Miss Crosby walked through that door, came down this aisle, sat in that chair, she was presumed to be innocent. As she stayed through this entire trial, she remained innocent, and she'll walk out of here innocent unless the government meets the burden of proof that they walked in. That burden is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I just want to be really clear about how high that burden is. The law doesn't ask you to look at our case next to the government's and decide which one is more likely. It's their job and their job alone to make sure that they've proved their case so completely that you don't believe there is any other reasonable explanation for what happened on July 4th. That is certainly not a burden they've met today. To show you why, I want to go back to those 3 questions I asked you at the start of this trial. Where was Blake Crosby? Where is the gun? Where is the person who actually killed Thomas Capella? So first, where was Blake Crosby? We told you. I called it option 2 on cross-examination. She smoked that cigarette on the 3rd, not the 4th. She was on the roof before the shooting, not during it. And there's one moment in opposing counsel's cross-examination that really summed up the government's case. She asked Blake Crosby, you were not at the rally. Blake Crosby says no. She said, you were on the roof. Blake Crosby says no. She said, you killed Thomas Capella. Blake Crosby said no. It's like the government just isn't listening. I mean, sure, there's contradictions in the eyewitness accounts. One person saw Blake Crosby here, one person saw Blake Crosby there, but members of the jury, it's 2-1 in favor of the defense. That's reasonable doubt. All they actually brought you was that cigarette, their smoking gun. But it's all smoke, no gun. And I mean that literally, members of the jury, there is no gun. That's question number 2. Where is the gun? A presidential candidate is assassinated, and the government can't even bring you the murder weapon. They found one part of it, a trigger guard in the trash can of a cheesesteak restaurant in Philadelphia. You know who had access to that trash can? Anyone who wanted a Philly cheesesteak. What evidence do they actually have tying my client to that trigger guard? Absolutely none. No fingerprints, no DNA evidence, nothing. So that brings us to the 3rd question. Where is the person who actually killed Thomas Capella? Government told you they had an answer, but that answer is wrong. Someone killed Thomas Capella. They did it publicly, in a crowd of hundreds of people who wanted him dead. In the hours after that shooting, the government was faced with the admittedly difficult job of finding a needle in a stack of needles, and they just picked Blake Crosby. They needed a conviction. Miss Crosby was convened. The thing that makes this case so tragic, so confusing, is that the person who killed Thomas Capella took something away from 300 million Americans. Senator Capello will not be on the ballot come November. Every time something like this happens, every time our electoral system is hijacked by violence, we become just a little less good, just a little less fair, a little less just. What the U.S. attorney is asking you to do today, to send an innocent woman to prison for a crime she didn't commit so we can all feel just a little bit more safe, just a little bit better. That's not justice. Miss Crosby deserves more than that. And so do you. Find her not guilty. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, let's clarify what we need. The defense counsel just told you that we, the United States, needs a conviction because it's convenient. No, members of the jury, we need justice. And the only way that justice can be served is if you find Blake Crosby guilty. The same person who had the skills of a sniper, the same person who was at the location of the time of the crime, and the person who had the motive to do it. As long as Thomas Capello is alive, none of us are safe. Members of the jury, Blake Crosby is not a patriot. She's an assassin. And defense counsel said, we won't be able to answer any of these questions. In fact, we haven't answered these questions. Where was Blake Crosby? Well, we already told you. At the rooftop of the Sonesta, where Harper Edwards says, I saw her going right up to the rooftop to smoke a cigarette an hour before Thomas Capello was assassinated. Where was the gun? Well, members of the jury, we brought you a piece of the gun the trigger guard found at the same place where Blake Crosby ate lunch. We found you the bullet, the one that matched the one found in Thomas Capello's skull. And that bullet was on the rooftop, inches, feet away from Blake Crosby's cigarette. And who actually killed Thomas Capello? Members of the jury, you don't have to look far. We've laid it out in front of you. Find Blake Crosby guilty and serve justice.